You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, December 3rd, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, my friend?
Well, buddy, happy to be here.
All right, good to be with you. We are also joined by South Stands contributor Chad Plummer from Cleveland CP. What's the word from the 216?
What up, what up? Oh, it's just cold.
Yeah, I'll bet. What's it doing back there? What are you guys in the 30s now or 20s?
Well, we had, the other day we had probably about 9 or 10 inches of snow.
Oh, wow.
Like 35-mile gusts of wind. It was pretty crazy. Yeah, so wonderful.
All right. Well, good stuff. Of course, we are here to preview Ohio State's matchup with Michigan State this Saturday in East Lansing. But before we get started, I want to remind our listeners about our new website, which you can visit at southstandsosu.com. You can listen to all of our podcast episodes there and check out our new blog. I also want to invite our listeners to head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review us. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback there. And finally, we invite you to give us a follow on Twitter at South_stands. That's South_stands. Okay. Knock on wood, fingers and toes crossed. Number 4 ranked Ohio State appears to be on track to actually play a football game this Saturday at noon Eastern against Michigan State in East Lansing. The line is Ohio State minus 24. The over-under is 59.5. The game will be broadcast on ABC. Now, we know the Buckeyes will be without Ryan Day, who's still quarantining with COVID. Larry Johnson will act as head coach. Kevin Wilson's going to call the plays on offense. Kerry Combs will run the show on defense. I believe Kevin Wilson said earlier today that he will actually be on the field calling plays, so he'll come down from the box. What we don't know and won't know probably until a couple of hours before kickoff. In fact, I think that's been confirmed a couple hours before kickoff is which Ohio State players are going to be out due to either infections or contact tracing, which adds quite a bit of intrigue to this game. Now, Ohio State leads the all-time series with Michigan State 33-14. The Buckeyes have won the last 4 matchups, including a 34-10 win in the shoe last season. Michigan State's last win in this series was the 17-14 stink bomb in the shoe back in 2015 that ruined Ohio State's national title defense. That was one of the low points for me as an Ohio State fan. Actually, Sparty has been the author of some pretty awful moments for Ohio State fans over the years. We remember the 34-24 loss in the 2013 Big Ten title game, and of course the 1998 upset of the number 1 ranked Buckeyes in the shoe. Hopefully we're not looking at, I know, sorry, I don't mean to bring up all those painful memories all at once there, PVH. But, obviously we're hoping for a far different result this Saturday. And it's hard to get a beat on this particular Michigan State team. Now they're 2-3. They lost their season opener to Rutgers, 38-27. Sparty had 7 turnovers in that game. Now, Rutgers has turned out to be a much improved program this season. And then the following week, Michigan State goes on the road and beats Michigan. Then they're run off the field the week after that by Iowa, 49-7, and then blanked by Indiana, 24-0 the following week. And then last week, as we all know, the Spartans were very impressive, taking down number 8 Northwestern, 29-20 in East Lansing. So I don't know, the question is, which Michigan State team are we going to see on Saturday? If I had to lay money on it, it's probably going to be the one that's closer to Northwestern, that version, but we'll see. Now, offensively, we're talking about, in Ohio State and Michigan State, we're talking about 2 teams that couldn't be more at opposite ends of the spectrum from one another. The Spartans come into this game dead last in the Big Ten in scoring offense at 18 points per game. By comparison, Ohio State's averaging 44 points a game. That's good for first in the Big Ten. Sparty's 13th, so second to last in the Big Ten in total offense, averaging 331 yards per game. That, by the way, is 112th in the country. By comparison, Ohio State is first, averaging 535 yards per game. Michigan State is dead last in the Big Ten at running the ball. They're averaging only about 98 yards a game. And Ohio State is first in the Big Ten running the football at 233 per game. Now, in the passing game, Michigan State's a little bit better. They're 8th in the conference, averaging about 233 yards per game. So they're not totally incapable throwing the football. Ohio State comes into this game 2nd in the Big Ten in passing. Funny enough, just behind Purdue at 304 yards per game. So very different offensively. The Spartans are led by junior quarterback Rocky Lombardi. He's coming into this game completing only about 54% of his passes, 8 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, but his 211 passing yards is 5th in the Big Ten. So, they're not spectacular, but they're not incapable throwing the ball, I think is my takeaway with Michigan State. He's got a pretty good receiver in Jalen Naylor to throw to. Naylor had a big 75-yard touchdown reception last week against Northwestern. He's averaging almost 24 yards per reception. So against that leaky Ohio State pass defense, I don't know, that's a matchup to watch. Junior Connor Hayward leads Michigan State in rushing. He's Cam Hayward's little brother. Remember Cam Hayward, guys, the star defensive end at Ohio State? Connor is Cam's little brother. Now, he's only averaged about 3.5 yards a carry. And he's part of a 3-man rotation at running back that includes Jordan Simmons and Elijah Collins. So they're not very dynamic running the football. None of them is really setting the world on fire there. And they're actually going up against a pretty good Ohio State run defense. On the other side of the ball, Michigan State is 6th in the Big Ten in total defense, allowing 370 yards per game. That's actually just ahead of Ohio State, who's 7th in the conference, giving up 389 yards per game. In defensive yards per play, Michigan State's been pretty good. They're averaging about 4.8 yards per play. That's good for 4th in the Big Ten. They have some dudes on that side of the ball. Michigan State does. Linebacker Antoine Simmons. Now, he was a player Ohio State recruited pretty heavily. He's having a really good year this year. He leads Sparty in tackles. He's 2nd in the Big Ten in tackles. Sparty also has a pretty good corner named Shakur Brown, who's 3rd in the Big Ten in interceptions with 5 picks. Brown had 2 picks last Saturday against Northwestern. And then finally, defensive tackle Naquan Jones is another player to watch for Michigan State. He's a big 5th-year senior, kind of a run stopper in the middle. He had 2.5 tackles for loss against Northwestern last week. So they do have some dudes, and they always seem to have some dudes that can play on the defensive side of the ball. That's the Skinny Boys for this matchup. Fingers crossed, but I think so far Ohio State has been able to practice now, have full team practices for the 3rd day in a row. So things are looking pretty good for Saturday. I want to go around the horn here and get some Concernometer scores from you guys. I'm going to fire up the Concernometer. Paige, I want to start with you. Why don't you give me your Concernometer score and tell me why you arrived at that score?
Yeah, this is just not this isn't your sister's typical Michigan State team. I watched the second half against that last week against Northwestern.
Right.
And they were life and death, obviously, to hold on and win that game. Now, you were texting me before that, that they were mashing in them up front. And give credit to Fitzgerald, and he probably made some adjustments. But it was, again, just the Roman vomitorium of offense watching those two teams play. It's an affront to the eyes. So I just cannot. I can't see them pulling this game off. I can't even really see it being close. Now, that being said, I think the two big variables, and you touched on them for Ohio State, is number one, who's actually going to play? Mm-hmm. I think as long as Justin Field gets on the airplane, we're going to be okay. That's probably the only thing we would actually need. So that's a variable. And the other variable is, is there going to be some rust because, they really haven't had, well, I guess how many practices did they actually miss? And probably not that many. So that might not be that big of a deal, but it'll be very interesting to see who, is sitting out for Ohio State. So that being said, normally my Concernometer, if it were a normal year at East Lansing, even with this team, you still got to give them some respect, a 2. But this isn't a normal year. This isn't your same Michigan State team. So normally I'd be a 0. With those other variables, I'm going to land at a 1. I'm just not concerned. Not
concerned at all. Okay. No Ryan Day. They're going to be down some personnel. We don't know who yet. And Michigan State's coming in this game playing with a lot of confidence after the big win, but you're only at a 1.
I'm at a 1.
Chad, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to ride with my buddy there, Paige. I wouldn't probably go to a 1. I would probably maybe go 0.25. But I don't think on our concediometer it actually has 0.25. So I'll stick with what we got. I'll go with a 1.
It's too hard to math.
Yeah, exactly. We discussed that the last couple of weeks, but I'm curious, and I know you mentioned this, is just who's going to be playing and who's not going to be playing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be that upset if there were a couple people, by the name of Marcus Hooker, that wasn't playing, just to kind of see what we got in some of the younger guys.
Mm-hmm.
But the history of this game, if you go back and look at it, we've had a couple scares, had a really bad loss when I can't figure out why in the hell Urban just didn't give the ball to Zeke and let him eat up the field. But hey, that's neither here nor there. And that's, a few years back. So I'm going to go with a 1.
Yeah. As you guys have already pointed out, Ohio State's going to be down some personnel. No Ryan Day. Now, Day did say in his radio show, he confirmed that they will be, quote, a little shorthanded against Michigan State. No, we don't know who or how many players will be out, and we won't know until a couple hours before kickoff when Ohio State releases its availability report. They mentioned today that report will not come out until Saturday morning. So the Buckeyes are going to be a diminished version of themselves to some extent. We just don't know how much. Now, they haven't played in 2 weeks. Paige, you mentioned the rust factor. There could be a little bit of rust. They haven't played in 2 weeks, and they've only played 1 game since November 7th. And Michigan State is a program that's never really been intimidated by Ohio State. They have to be feeling really good about themselves after last week's upset win over Northwestern. We still have some major questions and concerns about the back end of the Buckeye defense, which, when you have those kinds of vulnerabilities, any team can play with you when you're that vulnerable on the back end. So hopefully they've been able to work that out. But as of right now, we don't know that they've fixed those issues on the back end. And Michigan State is not completely incapable in the passing game. Occasionally they'll take some shots downfield and they can hit a couple of those. My concernometer is at a 4. I'm mildly concerned. It would be lower if Ryan Day was on the sidelines. It would be lower if I could be assured that we were going to have our full complement of weapons, our full roster. It's going to be cold. It's going to be down in the 30s. I'm not sure how much offense we're going to see, how explosive that Ohio State offense can be in that setting with maybe a little rust on it. But my concernometer is at a 4. I'm the worry ward of the three of us. I think that's been pretty well established. So
yeah. Have you seen Rocky Balboa throw the football? I mean, he could make some passes down the field, but he can't do it consistently. And I was wrong about that with like Penix Jr. Right? I was like, the guy could make some passes. He's way better than that kid. I mean, what I saw against Northwestern, you could, if you rattle him, I just don't see it happening. And so if you're Ohio State, I'd say you make sure that he can't beat you deep, and then you live with whatever they can do up front. And we all know that that's the strength of our defense.
Yeah. Paige, to your point, he's only completing 54% of his passes on the season. And again, to your point, last week against Northwestern, he did complete the one long ball for a 75-yard touchdown to Naylor. But on the day, Lombardi was only 11 of 27 for 167 yards passing. So not terribly accurate. I would think, Ohio State's not going to have to sell out to stop the run. And to your point, Paige, right? I mean, like maybe you dedicate some more resources to just preventing those long pass plays, right? And you live with giving some stuff up underneath. But this is a Michigan State offense that does not do anything well. Let's face it. I mean, they're a mediocre passing team at best. And they're not very explosive and they can't really run the football. So Ohio State's going to have to play defensively. They're not going to, they're going to have to play one of their worst games in recent memory for Michigan State to be moving the ball up and down the field on them. All right. Well, let's go around the horn here, boys. And I want to get your score predictions. So Paige, I'm going to kick it back to you. Give me a score prediction.
I'm going to go with 47-9, and that'll be a late fourth quarter touchdown. They'll go for 2. But yeah, this is, it's just not going to be close. I just can't see it. And I think, the other two variables, right? The gambling, hey, they did have a big win against Northwestern. Maybe they come out a little flat, although most teams don't do that against Ohio State.
Yeah, right.
Usually get their best shot.
Right.
And, Ohio State, there's a lot riding on this, right? I mean, not only do they need to win, they need to win convincingly, right?
Yeah.
Just with the abbreviated resume. So they can't fuck around. They've got to play a full 4 quarters. And they need to put up a convincing W just to make sure they stay in the top 4.
We haven't seen a full 4-quarter performance out of this team yet. I know they looked great in the first quarter against Nebraska, but then finished strong. And then they were just, they were good early on against Penn State, Rutgers, and Indiana. And then in the second half, again, they're minus 30 in fourth quarter scoring, Ohio State is, over their last 3 games. They've been outscored 44-14 in the fourth quarter of their last 3 games. Hopefully that's a trend they can buck. Chad, how about you?
I'm going to go with, because I really think that this game is important as far as a style point is concerned. Like you said, we need to play 4 quarters. I'm going to go, I keep going in the 50s, and I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to go 59-13. 59-13, the Buckeyes.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, the over-under, so you basically have Ohio State hitting the over. 59.5 is the over-under. Okay, wow. Very confident. All right, 59-13. I would be very happy with either of those results, either of your 2 score predictions. I'd rather not have to sweat this one out. It just seems like it's just going to be that kind of a season, though, right? We've been sweating since the season started. Okay, so again, Paige, you made reference to this, and I happen to believe it could be a possibility because Ohio State has only played once in the last month. They've had another 2-week layoff here. There could be a little rust on the Ohio State passing game. Maybe their timing's off. It might take them a little time to get rolling. We've already talked about how they'll be down some personnel because of COVID. They'll be going against a Michigan State defense that has a few dudes. Antoine Simmons at linebacker, Shakur Brown in the secondary, Naquan Jones up front at defensive tackle. It's going to be cold. Temperatures in the mid-30s. I like Ohio State in this one, 33-14.
Whoa.
They win semi-convincingly, but no Ryan Day on the sidelines. We don't know personnel-wise who's going to be there, who isn't. So I'm going to say 33-14 because of those unknowns. I think if I knew Day was going to be there and if I knew Ohio State was going to have its full complement of weapons, I'd tack on another 14 points to that score for Ohio State, but 33-14 is my final score prediction.
Nice. Question for you, Z. So I know you pretty much, with all your research and things you've read and whatnot, have you heard anything about will Dave be like in the headset of Wilson?
That's a good question. And actually, that was addressed today on Ryan Day's call-in show. By rule, he will not be allowed to have any contact with coaches during the game. So the coaches will coach, the players will play, but Day is not allowed to text or, have any kind of like line of phone into the booth. He's going to have to just sit there on TV and trust the game plan and trust, the experience of Kevin Wilson, former head coach, Kerry Combs, who's been doing this a while, obviously, and Larry Johnson he'll be kind of the CEO for this game. And Johnson will have input on certain plays, and I think they're all going to have input on things like timeouts and that sort of thing. So we'll see how it goes. I have a lot of experience there between those 3 guys. I'm not super worried about it. But in answer to your question, Chad, no, Day is not allowed to have contact with the coaching staff during the game.
Doesn't that seem crazy to you guys?
Yeah.
That seems like something like, somebody like a 1-game suspension or something would be able to have no contact or anything like that. It seems fucked up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is that a CDC guideline rule that we can't have COVID possibly transmitted over the airwaves? I mean, like, how many goddamn stupid rules do we not even know about that the Big Ten put in place for this season? Like, that's just absurd. You can't text.
Absurd.
Yeah, college football has a lot of silly rules, right?
But that's not a college football rule. That's a Big Ten rule.
This is per Nathan Baird at Cleveland.com. Day said he's not allowed to have in-game communications during Saturday's Michigan State game. He anticipates it to be the hardest 3 hours of my life. That's in quotes. Rules in place prohibit text messaging, etc., and communication with the sideline must be done via headset. Once the game starts, the coaches have to coach and the players have to play. That's from Ryan Day. Those are the rules. So it sounds like it might be either a Big Ten rule or just a an NCAA rule. But I agree with you guys. It doesn't make a ton of sense. And it'd be one thing if Day was being disciplined, right? If he was serving a suspension or something, that he couldn't have contact. Different. But I mean, come on, it's COVID. A lot of silly rules in college football. This is one of them. I mean, it's kind of right up there with like player loses his helmet during the play. He's got plenty of time to put it on and strap up his chin strap, but he's still got to leave the field for a play. That makes absolutely no sense. There is one thing that came of interviews that happened today. Both Kevin Wilson and Larry Johnson were interviewed today. Kevin Wilson did say he wanted to be on the sideline so that he could look Justin in the eye, which is a giveaway that Justin Fields will be available for the game. So if you're worried about Fields potentially being one of those players that's not going to play, he's clearly going to play based on those comments from Kevin Wilson.
Is that a nod to Vegas? Don't move that line too much.
Exactly.
The other thing, I got news for Ryan Day. These games aren't 3 fucking hours, bro. They're like 4.5. So let's get ready.
Especially when we go to East Lansing, man. That's going to be, those are always a grind. You guys know I like to take a historical view of a lot of these matchups. And that's another reason I had the score a little low for Ohio State is just every time they go to East Lansing, they very rarely eclipse 30 when they play in East Lansing. I mean, the last time they played there was 2018, and they went in there with a pretty high-powered offense that season. It was 26-6. A lot of that scoring, though, was done late in the fourth quarter after they wore Michigan State down. 2016, it was a 17-16 game in 2016. And the last time they really exploded Ohio State offensively was in 2014 when that was the big matchup when Michigan State was a top 10 team and we went in there and put 49 on them. Prior to that, 2012, we only scored 7. That was another 17-16 Ohio State wins. In East Lansing, these games typically tend to be lower scoring. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that those were some pretty good teams over those years, pretty good defensive teams for Michigan State. So it makes sense that the scoring is going to be a little lower. But I don't know. It's December. It's Michigan. It's cold. Ohio State might be a little rusty. Would not be surprised if the score is lower than we all expect, but I'll be all too happy to be wrong about that. Chad, I'd love to be, over 50 in this one. I'm tired of sweating this stuff out.
It might be a pipe dream, but I mean, it's, you said it is going to be a little cold, but it is going to be 39. It's going to be like partly sunny. So yeah, it's not going to be like conditions are going to be all right.
Think about this. If you're a player and you're creatures of routine, I mean, is there a person on the planet that is more a creature of routine than a college football player? And think of how disrupted this season has been for Ohio State. And, last week's game was canceled Friday night at like 11 o'clock. So you talk about distractions and interruptions to routines and stuff. It's a good thing that they have a lot of veteran players on this team. I think that's going to help them adjust.
The first prediction on our prediction pods should actually be, is the game going to be played? Yes or no?
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Well, so that's a good question. And let's spend a little time on the Michigan game. So the Michigan game appears to be in jeopardy with an outbreak there. Now we know that Michigan has canceled its game with Maryland this weekend. So fingers crossed that they're going to be able to play Ohio State. Did you guys watch the playoff rankings show and hear Kirk Herbstreit's comments about Michigan?
Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I listened to, did you guys hear the clip of the Michigan AD?
I read his comments, and naturally he was upset and took exception to what Herbstreit said. I mean, for our listeners that may not have heard Herbstreit's comments, basically Herbstreit said that he expected Michigan State to, quote, wave the white flag and opt out of this game next Saturday. In other words, he was suggesting that they would hide behind COVID as a reason not to have to play the game. And he was immediately pressed by Reese Davis during the show. What did you mean by that? And then Herbstreit kind of backtracked a little bit, and then he issued an apology immediately after the game on Twitter. Naturally, Michigan's AD, as you've already referenced, Chad, took exception to those remarks by Herbstreit. But then what? The next day, we hear about a COVID outbreak at Michigan. I personally have not been a fan of people pointing the finger in these situations. I honestly really believe everybody's acting in good faith. These programs are doing the best they possibly can to mitigate the spread of the virus, within their locker rooms. I know it's been a really rough season for Michigan, but I know, look, we've all been very critical of Jim Harbaugh, but come on. I thought that was a little bit below the belt by Herbstreit. I don't know, Paige, what did you think about Herbstreit's comments?
Well, he walked it back right away. Yeah, it was a stupid thing to say. And just because Harbaugh is crazy and a shitty coach, one thing he's not is a pussy, right?
Right.
Like if there's anything in the world that guy wants to do, it's to play football, right? I mean, he practically wants to suit up. I mean, for Christ's sake,
he wears cleats.
It's unbelievable.
Couldn't get any worse if he did.
Yeah. So to think that, they would purposely, I don't know where Herb Street, I don't even know why he even, for the guy that has spent 30 years going out of his way, not showing, being a total homer for Ohio State. Like he blew that up. It's just so funny, right? Like
right.
1 30-second clip, man. You're like, dude, what are you talking about? That is just absurd. And, give him credit. He immediately recognized it and gave a pretty solid apology, in my opinion. But it's just a dumb thing to say to start with.
Yeah, I agree. Chad, what was your view?
But like it was, like Paige said, you guys said, it's a stupid thing to say, but if there's not a person that more well-respected and does more research and knows college football more than Kirk Herbstreit, insert foot, whatever, all that shit. But I mean, he made a mistake and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically. But and then on the flip side of that, I mean, I'm just gonna have to say this 2 seconds because I can't stand that clown Desmond Howard, man. He is just an idiot. I don't even know why he's on that show. He just regurgitates so much shit. He was just trashing Ohio State the other night too. So you know what I mean? But Herbie said what he said. I think those comments from the Michigan AD were a little ridiculous, though. Basically calling Herbie a fool, and whatnot. But it is what it is. It's over now. But a lot of the guys that I was listening to today on that ESPNU, because it was all about the Big Ten and their drama, and they were all like, what we respect the hell out of Herbie, and maybe probably shouldn't have said it, but they were like, hey, he did, and if you apologize, so end the story.
COVID has not exactly brought out the best in everybody around the game of college football over these last few months. Herbie was the second former Ohio State player to make that kind of an accusation. Bobby Carpenter did it with Maryland. I'm just like, stop, shut up. You're giving us bad juju.
Yeah, Bobby's
anytime you point the finger at somebody like that, then COVID ends up on your doorstep. It's just not productive.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's just not productive. Everybody's trying the best they can to play football during a pandemic, and I don't think you need to go there.
That's the crazy world we live in.
Yeah, I just don't think you need to engage in the fan. And the fans are going to do it, right? It's all over Twitter. I mean, all week for the last several weeks, I've been watching fans on Twitter talk about, well, Michigan's going to, they're going to hide behind COVID numbers so that they don't have to play Ohio State. I was just really surprised to see somebody of Herb Street stature espouse those theories. Anyway,
the Big Ten basically has 24 hours. I mean, less than that now to get your shit together and find something in place. If this game doesn't happen in Ann Arbor, against Michigan, they've got to get us a game. And, look at what the ACC did for Notre Dame and Clemson.
Right.
Notre Dame's not going to play Wake Forest now. So they're going to give, because they're not going to reschedule that Florida State game for Clemson.
Right.
So they're going to give them that game off, and they're going to have a week off before they play in the ACC championship. And, it's just, they're making decisions on the fly. And the Big Ten needs to do something within the next, 12 to 24 hours. They've got to make a decision. And I love the fact that Barry Alvarez is being, a leader as far as that goes, and basically saying we've got number 4 team in the country in our conference, and we've got to do something to help them.
Yeah. So a couple of things need to happen, right? Either they reshuffle the schedule on the last week of the regular season. If Michigan can't go, then maybe Ohio State. There was some discussion of perhaps the Big Ten intervening and saying, hey, Rutgers and Maryland, know you guys were supposed to play the last week of the season. Rutgers, you've been able to play all your games up to this point. We're going to ask you to sit out, and we're going to have Ohio State and Maryland play that game that they weren't able to play earlier in the season to give Ohio State the opportunity to get that extra data point in. That's one option. which is interesting. We'll see if that happens. The other, maybe even the more likely option, though, is the Big Ten is just going to get rid of its 6-game rule for eligibility in the Big Ten title game, right? Because Ohio State, everybody except Indiana has been mathematically eliminated from winning the division, right? And Ohio State has a 2-game lead over Indiana. So I think probably the path of least resistance is just to say, okay, Ohio State, you can get in playing less than 6 regular season games. I expect the Big Ten to do that. And you actually referenced it, Chad, Barry Alvarez's comments that they might re-examine that rule and change it so Ohio State can play in the conference championship game. And then they would have, if they win it, that title of conference champion. I would love to see them get a 7th game in. And, look, Michigan's not off the table just yet. That game still might happen. I think they said by maybe like early next week, they're going to have to make a call on it, though, as to whether or not that game happens and whether they need to pivot and find Ohio State a different opponent. Paige, do you have any thoughts on this? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, we referenced the playoff ranking show earlier, and Ohio State checks in at number 4 again. So they hold at number 4 in the second college football playoff rankings. I thought that was a really good sign for Ohio State. Now, eventually not playing football games is going to catch up to them, and teams are going to start to leapfrog them. But it looks like Michigan State's going to happen. And I think as long as Ohio State can play and continues to win, they can hang on to that number 4 spot. There's one scenario there where they could get leapfrogged, right? They could lose that spot, which is if Florida beats Alabama. But short of that, if they can continue to play and continue to win, I think they're good. Paige, do you have any thoughts on the second college football playoff rankings?
There's a couple doomsday scenarios out there for them, but there's also a lot of football to be played. So there's ifs and buts. It's complete conjecture of, what might happen. And that we all know. And, in college football, it happens anyways, but this year it's even more, fruitless to try and guess what's going to come down the pipe. Sitting there at 4 is good. But let's just see what happens. And I think it'll probably be one more curveball headed our way, and then we'll just have to see how they handle it. Yeah.
Chad, what were your thoughts on Ohio State coming in at number 4 again in the rankings?
I'm happy where we are. Mm-hmm. I'm just concerned about, I'm glad we're playing this weekend. There was that came down to the wire. So let's just hope the Big Ten, I'll say it again, I hope they get their shit together, because, you got Florida is going to play Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Alabama. Just say they beat Alabama. They're both going to have one loss.
Right.
Clemson and Notre Dame. What if Clemson beats them, Notre Dame by a very small margin? The shit's going to get crazy, man.
I think that what you just described is the doomsday scenario that Paige mentioned. I think that's the one, and actually that's the one scenario. If you're looking at 4 high-quality one-loss teams in Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Florida, and you have Ohio State sitting there with only maybe 6 games played, that would be a doomsday scenario for Ohio State. I agree with you. I think we would be in big trouble there. All right, boys. Well, there is one other game I thought we'd take a quick peek at, since it's in the Big Ten, and it involves 2 of the better teams in the Big Ten. Indiana at Wisconsin. Now, we know Indiana is down Michael Penix Jr. He unfortunately has an ACL tear that occurred last week in Indiana's victory over Maryland. It's a damn shame. He's a hell of a player. I have a lot of respect for Penix. He was great against us. The line in that game, the game is played in Madison. The line in that game, Wisconsin minus 14, and the over-under is 45. Paige, you got any thoughts on this game? Who do you think wins it?
So is Wisconsin now alive in the West to make the championship game?
No, Northwestern
because they'll lose the tiebreaker.
Well, no, yeah, they would lose the tiebreaker, and actually, with Northwestern's game getting canceled this weekend against Minnesota, they clinched the Big Ten West.
Oh, they did.
They did. Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Who's Indiana's backup quarterback?
Yeah,
Jack Tuttle.
Yes, right, Paige.
Yeah, Jack Tuttle's his name.
Yeah, what a bummer for Indiana.
14's a lot of points, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, that's a huge blow, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that guy's going to have to pick that team up off the mat to get them fired up to play that game. So but he's a good coach, so he might do it. But I'd lean towards Wisconsin and actually them covering.
Wow. Okay. So you like Wisconsin to win pretty convincingly. Yeah, it's tough because, Indiana's a little one-dimensional on offense. They're very good defensively, but they can't run the ball.
Yeah.
And
can't run the ball.
Yeah. So yeah, tough break for Indiana. Chad, how do you see that game?
I guess it's like, it depends. Like, Wisconsin, is it going to be Jekyll or Hyde who shows up for the game? I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
That quarterback, if he, we were all like hyped up on that kid, 2 or 3 games into the season, and kid looked like he was a stud, and, then all of a sudden just went to shit. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Indiana covers the spread. I think they lose the game, though. Okay.
You like Wisconsin winning that. Yeah, in Madison, Indiana without Michael Penix Jr. I like Wisconsin in that one as well. 14 seems a lot because I think Indiana's got a pretty good defense. But I like Wisconsin to win the game. I don't think they cover as well. And now, unfortunately, we're going to see that's our one quality win. Indiana loses that game, probably drops a little bit. But, you've got a whole committee here that can evaluate that game, and they know that Michael Penix Jr. played when we played them. So Ohio State got Indiana's best when we played them. I got
something coming off the ticker from the BDP page.
Oh, nice.
The Iowa AD just said that the Big Ten has not had any discussions with regards to changing the game. Now, does that mean, that's not going to change? But he says as of now, or at least he just had a conversation with somebody from CBS Sports that they have not discussed that yet.
Sorry, not discussed what, Chad? Changing the game? Do you mean
the eligibility for the Big Ten championship?
Oh, the Big Ten championship game. Okay, all right. So that's still TBD. Okay, well, there's still time for that. Yeah, we'll see. Well, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. Michigan game isn't canceled just yet. We'll see what they do there. And maybe they're going to be motivated by some of these comments, by some of the criticism, by Herb Street's comments to show up and play in that game.
They'll also be motivated when the executives at Fox call the Big Ten and say, really? Like the biggest game of the season in your shitty ass conference, and you're not even going to play a game. I don't care if Ohio State plays a lacrosse team. We want them on TV, boys. We'll figure something out.
Yeah. You're right, dude.
Yeah, I tend to think there's still time, and they could make a fairly quick pivot. If you look at some of these games that have been scheduled, the reshuffling that's gone in other conferences, you can reschedule a game in an afternoon. Right.
They can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want.
That's the frustrating part. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Just
I
have faith.
I have faith. Yeah. I have faith that let's go get this win in East Lansing. And I do have faith that they will either find another opponent for Ohio State to play next week if Michigan can't go, or they will alter the eligibility rules for the Big Ten title game. All right, boys. Well, hey, that was a great effort for a Thursday night. Why don't we end it here and then plan to reconvene on Sunday to recap Ohio State, Michigan State? You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.